All right, well, we'll begin with what inspired you to join the military?
Sure, that's a good question. I think growing up as a kid, I was the youngest of five, three older sisters, an older brother, and myself. And my dad had been in the Korean War. He was a sergeant in the Korean War, and his dad had been in World War II. So although it wasn't a deeply rooted military family, there was a sense of service that sort of was established even early on as a kid. And I think I learned that from my dad. One fall afternoon, we actually took a trip to West Point. The University of Massachusetts football team was playing the Army football team. So we went up, and after that time, I was inspired to consider service. I think my dad's service, both he and my grandfather were Purple Heart Award recipients. So there was a sense of dedication and service to the country that kind of led me to wanting to serve in some way. And having the opportunity to see West Point, I was like, well, let's try that route. And I was fortunate to be able to get accepted and go my military service through the academy route.
Yeah, so you mentioned you took a trip to West Point, but did your hometown and where you grew up have any effect on your decision to join the military?
You know, it did. We had a lot of, it was very small. I grew up in Palmer, Massachusetts, which is a very small rural town. It's an exit on the Massachusetts Turnpike, so it's an interesting town. But there was a lot of patriotism in that town. A lot of Vietnam vets. There's a Vietnam War Memorial, Korean War Memorial, World War II Memorial. So there was a deep tradition of serving country in some way, shape, or form. So, and there was also in our high school there was awards given for sports for prior athletes who had also been veterans. So I think that sort of underlying tone of patriotism, of service, was throughout the small town. Yeah.
Can you describe your time in the military as well as any memorable experiences?
Sure. So after I graduated from West Point in 1987, which seems many years ago, I was only in the active duty for a short time. I got out in 1991. I had almost a little over 4 years in, but I was stationed with the 25th Infantry Division. I was an infantry officer. Went to Ranger School, Jump School, all the infantry schools that you're required to go to. So I get to be a lieutenant in the 25th Infantry Division, the 3rd of the 21st Infantry Battalion. And then after being a platoon leader, I get to be an executive officer for a company in that same battalion. And it was shortly after that that I actually got out of the service, active duty wise. 3 years later, I actually went back into the Hawaii National Guard. I was part of the 29th Separate Infantry Brigade, which I'm not sure if it's still in existence in that format now, but I ended up becoming a combat engineer commander for about a year. So my experience was all rewarding, all very good. You know, it was tough. It was challenging at times, but I think the experiences that I had in the military were nothing but positive. I think some of the most memorable ones are those cohesive moments, whether as a platoon leader, lieutenant, or as a company commander in the Guard, really trying to get the guys to work together as a team. Whether it was a deployment we were on, I think as a brand new lieutenant, I can remember one of the first deployments we were in Team Spirit, which was in Korea in February. And I still remember sitting on the edge of a hill. It must have been 15 below zero, waking up in the morning with my platoon sergeant who had been in the service for a good 30 years or so, and just looking at my rifle and seeing the frost on it. And I couldn't help think about my dad in the Korean War, thinking this is what he went through, but he actually had bullets firing at him. So I was fortunate that even though I was part of the service, I was not ever part of a combat area. It was not during the time of combat. So all of my time was when there was not any conflicts going on. But that was very memorable in a sense. I was freezing my tail off, but at the same time, it was something I don't forget. Probably the other memorable time was as a brand new lieutenant going through Ranger School, and one of my best friends, Dan Evans, who we don't talk to each other very often, but we were Ranger buddies at the time. And whenever we see each other at anything or on Facebook or whatever, it's this camaraderie that never goes away. And he and I looked at each other and we said, "It wasn't for you, I wouldn't be standing today, at least in the way I am." So I think being able to have that camaraderie is the thing that's most memorable, and that I take away from the military the most. Yeah.
And what places have you served besides Korea?
Yeah, so I was stationed in Hawaii, 25th Infantry Division. From there, I did some deployments. We went to Korea twice. We went to Alaska once. Did not go to Europe and during my training. Of course, as a brand new lieutenant, I did my basic officer training at Fort Benning, Georgia. And the Big Island of Hawaii is a big training ground over there, so I trained in the Big Island of Hawaii. So I think those are all the deployments I had. Also Japan, excuse me. Did a short 10-day trip to Japan with the Ground Self-Defense Force, where our unit actually trained for winter warfare, which is pretty interesting. So it took me a lot to the Pacific Rim is where I kind of did most of my training. I never got to the European area or the Middle East.
Yeah, so looking back on all those memorable experiences, how would they compare to other moments that you remember from outside the military?
That's a good question. I think from comparison of my career and from overall life, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like any memorable experiences, anything.
Yeah, I think the way they connect and compare is whenever there was, probably the most connection is through team sports that I played. I think whenever I was involved in any sports, whether it would be recreational, high school, as an adult playing a softball league, I think the camaraderie is the thing that resonates between it. There's a sense of deep connection. There's a deep connection and loyalty to mission and purpose. So when I think of things that I've done outside of the military, it always resonates with me well when it's something that we're trying to accomplish a goal or trying to complete a mission of some sort, whether it be a project, an event, or even something as simple as revamping an office or restructuring an office setting. Yeah.
All right, so upon exiting the military, what set you apart from people that hadn't followed a service-oriented pathway?
The thing I probably noticed first and foremost was the sense of the difference in perspective. What I mean by that is how you look at the world and how you look at solving problems. It's a sense of we can get this done if we just figure out. It's very much a problem-solving perspective versus just having to go through the motions and do your daily job. I think that's one thing. The perspective is different. The lens is different. I think the second thing is discipline. There's a sense of, and that's not meant to be framed in a judgmental way, but you're trained to be disciplined. It's something that's ingrained in you from day one out of basic training, whether it be in any service. There's a sense of you have to get this accomplished and you have to figure out how, and by having discipline, that takes away one less issue as you try to navigate the problem. So I think that, and then organizational skills. There's a lot, I think I noticed a lot more organizational skills around a purpose. There's a sense of, there's a mission to accomplish. There's a sense of loyalty. There's a sense of dedication to whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. I think that's the thing I noticed right away. I went from the military right into the nonprofit field. So I like to say I never had to apply for a regular job because I went from military public service to nonprofit service, and there's a lot of similarities in that. It's all about serving. But even in the nonprofit field, initially it was in the faith-based nonprofit field. So I was one of a group of about 10. We're part of a staff of a large organization, a large church organization, and yet I was the only military. I was the only person who was a veteran who was a military, and there was a lot of differences, and I noticed those differences in my perspective on getting things done. I became the lead operations officer for our large conference that we would hold every year, and I think I took on that task because of that background bringing from the military, the ability to organize, the ability to be very disciplined and organized and mission, purpose, and perspective. Not that I haven't met very organized and disciplined people outside of past military service or non-military service, but I think that's something that we bring into public service in general.
Yeah, so you mentioned a couple skills that really had a large impact on your life, but what would you say is the most important skill that you gained in your time in the military?
Probably the most important skill is teamwork, the sense of working with others to accomplish a common goal. What was pretty obvious through the military and something that was trained from day one is that you can't get through any problem on your own. I think I've taken that away with me in everything I've done from that point. You need good leaders, you need people leading from the front, but their perspective needs to be, we have to do this together. We have to do this as a team. So that's probably the biggest thing I took away. Right in the close tail of that is loyalty, a sense of we have to, it kind of goes hand in hand with being a team, that you have to be trustworthy and loyal to one another. But throughout my career in the nonprofit world, over 20 years now, it's all about being loyal to the mission of the organization, not to any one given person, but being loyal to what you're trying to accomplish. And you have good leaders, you have not so good leaders, you have team members who are not necessarily on the same page, and part of the challenge is to get everybody on that same page, allowing different viewpoints and perspectives to accomplish the mission. So I think those two things, teamwork and loyalty, are probably the biggest components I took away from the service.
How has your military service impacted your career, commitment to public service, or any other aspects of your life?
So I think my military service has sort of framed how as I work in the world, in the non-military service world, with a sense of it's not just about doing your everyday work, but there's a bigger purpose behind it. That if it's a nonprofit, it's a mission you're serving. It's you're trying to cure a certain disease, or you're trying to provide a certain human service for people. If it's a product in the world, you're trying to develop the best product to help people, whether it be a car or a technological app of some sort. That there's a sense of, to me, it goes beyond just getting the job done. It goes beyond just putting your 40 hours in, getting a paycheck. Not necessarily there's anything wrong with that. I mean, people have got to live, people got to do their jobs, but I think for me, it allows me to look at my job that way. And currently I serve as an executive director for a nonprofit. And I serve as the CEO, the COO, and the CFO. And on any given day, I have different jobs to do. A friend of mine recently asked me, what's your daily day like? And I explained to him, and he goes, wow, so it's projects and people. I go, absolutely. But my perspective is projects and people around serving, around a bigger purpose, not just to make sure we put our time in. And so that then entails and informs how I lead my agency, that I want others in my organization, the directors of our programs, to sort of take that approach as well, that it's not just about coming to work every day, but it's about something a little bit bigger than us. So if you could boil it down, it's about selflessness versus selfishness. It's not saying that I'm a selfless person all the time, but I think it's about other people above ourselves. Hopefully that's a little bit more clear.
Yeah, so clearly looking at your background, your time at West Point, as well as your time as the CEO, CFO, COO of this nonprofit organization that you work for, is all of this, would you say that all this happened due to your commitment to public service and how much the importance of public service to you? Or
I think that, that really framed, I don't think if I wasn't in the military, if I didn't serve in the military, I probably wouldn't be serving in the nonprofit field today. I think there's a continuity of, it's about serving others, it's about helping others. And so it's kind of a challenge to look at that, because you can't go back and look at what would have or wouldn't happen. But learning from my dad to be someone who served others, going into the service, and that being a big part of what the service is all about is public service, that naturally led me to my next phase of my life after the military of serving others in some way, shape, or form. And that became through nonprofit work, which is really meaningful, because it gives a sense of you're doing something beyond the dollars. You're doing something beyond, going to work every day, which resonates really with the mission of the military as well. It's designed to protect and serve the country when needed, right?
All right. So do you have any advice for young people today in relation
Sorry.
I'll
Go ahead.
just-
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for young people today in relation to the importance of public service?
Yeah, I think all young people should do public service. I mean, it's pretty simple, and here's why. I think what public service does is it develops the empathy muscle. We're all, we talk about working out and running and, keeping in good shape, and we talk about intellectual abilities and doing well academically. The thing that public service does, I believe, more than anything else, is it really strengthens the empathy muscle. And what I mean by that is it gives you a different lens to look at the world. When you're doing public service, it's not about you, it's about others, and it's about how you can help others. And that then increases your own empathy, which then leads to compassion and helping other people in times. And so ultimately there's a ripple effect there. I think public service then begets public service. And young people, by doing that, can create a more resilient society and more resilient community, because there's a little bit more empathy, there's a little bit more compassion that's going around because of that. And so when somebody says, should I go volunteer for this or should I go into this field? I think it never hurts to do some public service. Even in my own role as my main position as an executive in this nonprofit, I volunteer for 3 other organizations, just so that I can keep my empathy muscle being strengthened and be able to serve and look at things from a different angle. Yeah.
So you mentioned your empathy muscle and how that can be strengthened by involving yourself in public service. So do you think that that idea of involving yourself in public service is important to a full life and important to happiness and a very...
Absolutely. I think whenever you do something to serve, whether you're working with supporting the environment or preserving the environment, or whether you're working at a homeless shelter, or whether you're helping seniors, or whether you're helping children with disabilities or special needs, there's a sense of great meaning that comes from that. And so it's deeper than just doing the service itself. And I think that rounds out a person. That gives them a sense of, it's not just about me, it's about the us, it's about the we. So I think there's a huge benefit to that. And it allows you to look at life from a different lens and through a different perspective, and to think about things that you maybe have never thought about before. And it helps you to be more curious about your own self and about your strengths and your own awareness of your own weaknesses. So it always blows my mind whenever I'm volunteering or helping in some way, and I just reflect on that and wow, I've never thought of that before, and it just helps me to be a better person overall. So the short answer to your question is probably yes.
Okay, so with that question, that will conclude the main part of our interview, but for the end, I know that there's a couple of things that may have not been answered in these questions. Is there any things that you would like to add that would inspire people to the importance of public service?
Yeah, I think public service is so important in the sense of, it just gives a sense of meaning. By doing that, it gives you a purpose, a sense of that it's not about what you're going to do in this world, but it's about the bigger impact of how you can help others, how others can help you. And I think there's a sense of, by having a perspective of public service, the world can only get better. Can't get worse. At least I don't think it can. So I'll end on that, I guess.
All right, well, thank you for sharing your experience, and thank you for your service. I think that will conclude our interview.
Great, thanks. Anything else that you guys want to ask? Or
A quick question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, for someone who doesn't know where to start but they want to serve publicly, where would you tell them?
What age are you talking?
Or any age.
Any age.
Youth to the elderly.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think there's so many. I think where you start is you start in your local community. There's so many needs in the local community. I mean, I'm here in Silicon Valley. It's one of the most blessed places in terms of opportunities and wealth and whatnot, but there's absolutely so many needs here in this community. There's homeless people. There's people that are living in shelters. There's people that don't have a place. They don't have enough food. So You would think that in an area like this, that's not the case, but it is. So even going to, a good place to start is if going to a local nonprofit that does human service work and say as their volunteer opportunities. That's kind of the start of public service. It could be as simple of going to the local Veterans Association and ask them, are there opportunities to serve vets? Are there opportunities to, I mean, sometimes we think of public service in grand methods, but sometimes it can be very simple things like making simple deliveries to people. When I first started getting into doing some volunteering, I had volunteered with Make-A-Wish Foundation years ago. And this is when I was in Hawaii still. And I set up a time to go to the hospital and do the work, and I went there and I was helping, I was playing with this little kid, and I was helping them, and I thought I was doing such an amazing thing. Later on, I found out it was one of the nurse's daughters who happened to be there at the hospital that day. But it really didn't matter because I was there to support those families. While that little girl was there and I was, entertaining her, the nurse was talking to the mom. So there was still an element I was actually serving, even though I had no idea that this wasn't one of the families that I thought I was serving. So it's just interesting how that in and of itself was rewarding. So the simplest place is start locally and ask around. I mean, there's a lot of nonprofits. The other places, there's a lot of the public library. They use volunteers, right? But go simple. It doesn't have to be grand, because I think once you start working in public service, it just blossoms to something pretty awesome. It's a good question.
Yeah, so adding on to Eric's question, would you say Boy Scouts is a good opportunity?
Absolutely.
To get yourself into public service? Yeah,
I mean, I think the Boy Scouts are great. I was not a Boy Scout. I became a Weeblo, and then I gave up. And I got involved in sports too much. So I was a Cub Scout, Weeblo, and then I think I stopped. But I still have my book. My mom kept it for me. But I think it's great. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to serve. Even this project you both are doing, Ben, it's a way to be a public service, to teach people about public service. So, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Kiwanis clubs, Rotary clubs, there's a lot of clubs and opportunities to serve and get involved in the community in that way, both at a human services level, the arts, environment, a lot of different places to get involved. Yeah.